Hey, Yannis, thank you for coming in. You're just such an outstanding visionary. You're very, superb at execution as well. Your background is so diverse. I mean, it's in entrepreneurship elements, there's founding elements, global penetration, in the research side. You're the first double tenure president of the ACM that's ever happened in our history. And ACM is number one in computing science. Definitely, it's the largest computing science organization or largest computing organization, but also computing science organization. And has the top award in this area. You name it, and there's you, and you sit across so many different ventures at the top excellence level. So thank you for coming in and sharing your insights with my audience.
Thank you for the undeserving introduction, and it's a great pleasure to be here and always talking to you on things of the future and innovations and all the great challenges we have ahead of us.
So, Yannis, we did an interview prior to your first term as ACM president, where you were elected amongst this community of over 100,000. And then and then we did an interview after, as you became president, and that's where you launched this vision, and we're starting to execute on this vision of 4.0. And so we done two prior interviews. Now, for the first time, as I mentioned, you then got elected for another term as president.
Second term.
Never happened before in ACM history. And that's because of the strength of your background, your vision. And you have now progressed ACM 4.0. Can you talk about that progression? So we'll catch the audience up. And you're calling this now ACM 4.1. So bring us up to date.
Well, being my main field of interest is data management, data processing, data analytics. And so it's around software on data. And, in the tradition of software, you have versions. So I transferred this philosophy into my strategic planning for ACM. And when I was first elected, based on my own vision and conviction of where ACM should go, but also feedback from the community and various comments, I established, I planned for 10 presidential task forces on important strategic dimensions where I felt and the community felt that ACM should change in order to pivot and be ready for the next, I don't know, 15, 20, 25 years. And this got going, every presidential task force in different stages and different speeds of development. And then when I was honored by the membership of ACM, as you said, about 100,000 people around the world, I was honored to be reelected. Some new challenges had come up. So 4 more presidential task forces were formed. And so from 4.0, which was, the original strategic plan, now we have 4.1 with this 14 strategic working groups and presidential task forces to advance. And some have finished their work, some are operating right now, and a few are starting as we speak. So that by the end of my second and final term, we have a 2-term limit. I believe and hope that all of them will have finished their work, and the reports will form the strategic plan for the future of ACM. And based on we serve our community of members, but also society at large, because computing is at the center of all human activity, all science, all industry, all societal interactions. And so some of the presidential task forces are focusing on our members, some on what we do for society, some on our products and services as a not-for-profit organization, and some for our internal activities. All in all, 14, as I said. And they range from a new financial model for us. We have to take care of our finances in the new world that is being shaped around us, all the way to helping the United Nations achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, none of which can be achieved without serious use of technology and computing aspects that we um, serve, and we have conferences and journals and so on. Open science, which is the new way of new philosophy of conducting research and opening up our processes, our internal scholarly communication, internal within the scientific community, external to society, our code of ethics, and many other elements that constitute essentially the, the epitome of ACM's mission and ACM's vision. So this is all in all where we're going.
Yeah, and in fact, the UN SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, actually complete at 2030, and then they're going to have to come up with a new series, right? It's about every 15 years. In 2000, they came out with the Millennium Development Goals from 2000 to 2015, and then 2015 they came out with the SDGs to take it to 2030. So there'll be work on the next 15 years post 2030, which would be an interesting time, right? Because of the convergence of all of these different kinds of technologies. And as you mentioned, and I'm old enough to remember that you had to actually convince people the importance of computing at one time,
Yes,
right?
correct. Yep.
And
We're
then
past that now. It's not. And now we need to convince people to not be fearful of computing, especially with AI coming in. So it's a very different world. But speaking of this 15 years or so of development that the United Nations mentioned, let me say that this year, June 30th to July 4th, I think that week is a big event of the United Nations for financing for development. It's an event, it's the fourth event in the history. It's happening every 10 or 15 years. And it's happening in Seville, in Spain. And ACM has made all the arrangements, and it's a certified organization to be present. And in fact, we are organizing a side event of ACM as part of the Finance for Development meeting. And the title of this event is Smart Technology, Fair Finance: The Promise and Risks of AI for Development. And we will be bringing in economists and computing scientists and people from civic society to discuss on how we can bring in the smartest of technologies, but use it in a way so that financing, especially of the developing world, especially of the underprivileged regions of our world, for their financing to be fair. And how do you do this, and how AI can help? And I'm really excited. Only 3-4 days ago, we heard that this side event was approved by the organizers of the fourth Financing for Development Summit of the UN. So ACM will be closer to what society really needs, what the world really needs, bringing our technology close to finance and with the right human principles, which is fairness and so on. So I'm really excited about that. And of course, many of the leaders of ACM helped for this to happen. Virginia Dignum, who is our ACM Technology Policy Council co-chair, and myself will be co-moderating this event. So it's very exciting for ACM and for me personally to see this happening in the context of the UN.
That's amazing that ACMN is embedded in this event, and it's only held periodically. And you indicate it's about serving the underserved, basically, and bridging the gap from a finance standpoint. So digital finance will be, a key component. And ACM is at the center of this and in leadership. Now, I can personally relate because in the lead up to the AI for Good program in 2016, the ITU asked me to convene a full day on AI.
Mm-hmm.
It was half the day. I actually keynoted and then moderated and brought in all the speakers. And the other half was on finance, digital
I
finance.
see.
And
Yeah,
that
makes
was back
sense. Yeah, it is. yeah, two pillars of development that
Right.
they have to dance together.
Yeah, and then in 2015, I was asked by a group of 100 CEOs, they called the Financial Services Roundtable. They were the top 100 representing about 92.7 trillion in assets under management. So I founded and chaired their advisory council to help them iterate and of course, they're in the financial aspect. And of course, part of that discussion was the underserved. How do you close the gap for those who are excluded from the digital finance revolution that was occurring? And I did that from 2015 to 2019.
All
So
right. Right.
yeah, and a key part of that was, how do we bring inclusion globally in finance and digital platforms? So I can definitely relate to the importance of what you're doing. And in fact, that is still embedded on the AI for Good program there. That one is
Absolutely.
also already embedded. Now, um, ACM is one of the founders and sort of the co-developers of the top supercomputing conference called the SC conference. Can
Yes,
you talk
yes.
more about where you see that going and high performance computing and supercomputing? You see it being mentioned in terms of infrastructure as being, a basis for um, high performance sort of AI supercomputing as well. You're seeing this embedded into these chip clusters, which can now get into the exaflops if they're constrained into AI. Can you talk more about that? And of course, ACM is a big leader in this area.
Supercomputing, we are co-organizing, exchanging year after year the leadership of it with IEEE is currently our largest conference in terms of participation. It's a research conference, it's a practice conference, it's a technology exhibition, and it is an event with extremely energetic vibes, no matter where you are. I really enjoy being there. This is not my area. Data is my area, but of course, data is everywhere. So, including in supercomputing, and it is amazing all the progress that has been happening, both in high performance computing and also high throughput computing, and high throughput computing being captured by cloud policies, and so on. So, one big task that you need, high performance, or gazillion smaller tasks where you need high throughput, and how these architectures are evolving, and sometimes, um, I won't say merge, but anyway, are coming closer together, are catered at the supercomputing conference. And now, I mean, we used to have the high-end simulations and parallel capturing of physical phenomena and so on. This was the original, if you want, motivation for supercomputing in general. And then AI came and hit us on the head, and it's an amazing new world that has opened up. New world, both in terms of potential and capabilities, but also in terms of challenges for computing. And now many of the events that are happening in around the supercomputing conference, but also in other conferences on this theme, have to do with AI. This is inevitable because you need extreme parallelism, matrix multiplications, matrix inversions, and all of this linear algebra. And you need special chips, and various manufacturers, have grown tremendously with having had already chips for other applications, like for graphics, which also needed matrix multiplications. Now you see them for AI, and now all these are embedded in huge computing centers and data centers in order to do the AI processing and give us the results that we want in terms of generative AI and all the other forms of artificial intelligence. So the topic of high performance computing or supercomputing and AI together coming, it's explosive. Each one of them are very fertile, very exciting. But when you bring the two together, then you have a new, not a new universe, but a new brave world that is there to be conquered. And this will continue. You know that there is the 500 the top 500 supercomputers, the list that has been um, published every year. And it's always, of course, a pride for a country or an organization to have this as its main uh, going up in the ladder and being number one or number five, depending on where they were. So ACM now is moving in the direction of having a much larger role in publishing this list. So it will come to the hands of a non-for-profit organization, the largest global and if I may say, the most important organization of computing professionals. So ACM will have a leading role in publishing this. So more and more the chips fall into place in my mind anyway. And of course, you have quantum. People will say, okay, but there we have a singularity. You have a discontinuity. You have something completely different. Everyone is holding their breath to see where quantum will lead us. Still, I think the jury is out in terms of whether quantum will be the appropriate technology for general purpose computing, or it will be for specialized computations that are appropriate to quantum phenomena. We'll see that. Just to give you an example, to multiply two numbers in a quantum computer, I'll just throw out numbers, is orders of magnitude more expensive than to multiply two numbers in a regular computer. On the other hand, to factorize, to find let's say the two prime factors of a number in a quantum computer is order of magnitude faster than to factor out a number in a regular computer. So there seems to be currently, for the time being, a specialization on the things where quantum computing will really revolutionize the way we do things, but it doesn't cover everything. So we are all holding our breath and see where the technology will go. Every year we say we cannot have more than n bits, n qubits, I mean, the quantum bits. And then in a year or so, a major computing corporation comes out and said, well, we're building this machine and we're prototyping it with a lot more than n, which was expected to be kind of the limit. So again, we live in very exciting times in quantum as well. And if it lives up to its promises, then we have to think about a whole bunch of other technologies like cybersecurity and safety and storage on how you are able to process tremendous sizes of data, because quantum can do things in parallel in a way that is not only non-linear, but it's not analytically expressed. So it is tremendous growth in quantum. We'll just see if it is for everything or limited to some very important, very challenging problems, but not everyone.
This year I had an interview with Bronson Mazur, who's the director of science at Oak Ridge National Laboratories, and they have the exascale supercomputer, and they definitely are integrating in a hybrid model quantum computing, and AI is infused in all of this. And in the interview, he indicated that JP Morgan was doing an optimization problem using the quantum aspect of this hybrid combination that they're doing. And that's with their Frontier exascale supercomputer, which has been out now for a few years. And then you have Quantinuum, and I did an interview with Quantinuum, the founder of Quantinuum. His name is Elias Khan.
Mhm.
And they've done partnerships with Microsoft and the cloud, combining with the high performance computing, but in this kind of hybrid model. And they signed an agreement with RIKEN, which is the kind of the national laboratory system in
Japan.
Japan, to
Yes.
produce these hybrid
Fukaku,
systems
yeah.
to combining super high performance computing with quantum. So that's definitely, as you indicated, where things are going, right? There's things that supercomputers are really great at and better than quantum, but there's things that quantum potentially could be much better at. So if you combine
So
the two,
for some, it is given that they're much better, but what are these? What are the limits of their superiority? Is something to be discovered.
yeah, and then how do you orchestrate this so that you know so that you have this kind of meta layer that will do the abstraction,
Decide, yeah.
worry about where it gets handed off to, right? So and how do you orchestrate that, right? So and they're working on these kinds of things, right? So I think it's really interesting that ACM, of course, is plugged into this quantum area right now,
Absolutely.
very much
Absolutely.
tracking it. You have uh, and leadership in terms of thought leadership, and definitely in the high performance computing, as you mentioned, because you co-convene the top number one supercomputing conference in the world, the high performance computing conference in the world, and now you're in leadership and maintaining that top 500 list. Hopefully, you can bridge. I know China has been kind of resistant now of putting their supercomputing into that list. So
This
maybe
is true.
there's a nonprofit behind it. Maybe they'll kind of submit to that list. And I know Jack Dongara, who I'd interviewed a few years ago, was also sort of key to that. And Jack won the Turing Award from ACM for that work, right? So you see the name ACM again, ACM, ACM, ACM.
We are not just now that I'm the president of ACM, even more so now, but even as a member of ACM, uh, uh, everything that ACM does, it is trying to do it with excellence and high quality as the first value that it tries to uphold to. And this is a source of pride. And the work that you just mentioned, being embedded in all the good things that are happening around supercomputing and quantum and so on, and in many other areas, it is it is a source of pride because the goal is to serve the community and to advance technology, and that's what ACM's mission is.
So earlier this year, I did two interviews with which would be of interest to you. One is with Yann LeCun, who won the
For
ACM
sure.
Turing Award
Yeah.
for his work in pioneering AI, neural networks, and
Neural networks, yeah.
yeah, particularly in the convolutionary neural network side, he was really the forerunner of that. And then I did another interview this year with Jeff Hinton. Of course, he won the Nobel Prize, which he picked up in December of last year, in physics for his work in computer science. So,
And also the Turing Award together with Yann LeCun
yeah,
and Joshua Bengio.
and they actually all of them won the Queen Elizabeth Engineering Prize as well. So the reason I bring this up is because I want to get your point of view. Because in my interview with Jeff this year, he talked about why he left Google in 2023, so he could talk more freely. He talked about sort of his journey in deep learning and neural nets, and even through the fact that he actually approached Jensen Huang prior to 2012 in ImageNet he actually
Mm,
pushed him about, hey, can you give us one of your graphics card, or we're in research, and he kind of did, he ignored it. But after the ImageNet, he didn't ignore them anymore, right? But he talked about that kind of journey, and again, this is kind of my recollection from an interview that was
sure.
several months ago. I recommend they go to ACM because that interview with Jeff is with ACM. I did an interview with Yann LeCun, and it's with ACM.
Of
Now,
course.
now I'm going to present two different contouring kind of points of view that they presented, right? One is which Jeff Hinton left, and he's saying there's something going on here, and he's thinking that maybe there's subjective experience that these things are. And he even one of the final comments was, if you don't think that these things are going to have some kind of consciousness, then it's not human consciousness, but some kind of form of consciousness, then you don't believe in sort of like sort of this kind of mathematical basis of science, right? Or sort of objective science. I mean, that's my interpretation, but he definitely believes there's more going on, right? And he feels that LLMs currently, though there will be improvements, like you saw Google using their Google diffusion model, which is typically being used for graphics, now being used for doing kind of inference thinking and things like that, like what you're seeing with the LLM based, right? Where
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you can use it for kind of standard what we're using right now for OpenAI or Anthropic. They've got the diffusion model. Looks like it can do that, and you have but Jeff is saying this continual evolution on that track will result in something that will be AGI, right? And then he has this fear because he says it's non-zero, that these things we may not be able to control it, right? So it's non-zero, right? And
Yeah,
then
yeah, yeah.
it goes
Yeah,
into predictive probability of what that could be, right? But he's guessing, right? And he's saying that this is in the nearer term, let's say in 5, 6 years, something like that. It's going to 10 years perhaps, but he's thinking that it potentially could happen.
maybe sooner.
But then you have Yann LeCun, he's now working on JEPA, the Joint Embedded Predictive Architecture, this kind of world model. He definitely doesn't believe LLMs or that track. He thinks it's my interpretation. Go to the ACM interview so you can do your own interpretation.
Yes.
My interpret
Okay.
so I want to put these caveats in here, but my interpretation is he thinks that's a dead end, and you need some kind of other model, maybe some symbolic capability in there. And he's working on this JEPA World Foundation or this world model. He definitely believes in open source, and this will come to an open science, right? Open weights and where that's going. And my interpretation, he's thinking it's longer term. And I think he believes there will be AGI, but definitely maybe longer term. And I think he's thinking more it's machine. And I'm not sure if he's really into this subjective experience and consciousness side that Jeff is sort of on the circuit and doing lots of interviews. So, and when we had earlier talked about this at our last interview, I would say you're probably more on the Yann LeCun kind of thinking. So, have you updated? Because there's been so much progress. Like I actually signed up for Gemini Ultra, the one that's
I see.
costing
Wow.
$400 a month, Canadian. Um,
Wow.
and I'm in the OpenAI Pro model, which is costing about $350 a month, the Canadian, right? So I can compare the two, and I can tell the improvements with Gemini are quite profound. So I'm probably more leaning on the Jeff Hinton side, but where do you sit on this spectrum?
So you're leaning more on the Jeff Hinton, you
Yeah,
said?
yeah. As
I
a
see.
futurist, right?
Yes. It is first of all, I've read enough predictions of enough uh, important personalities of the past that have failed miserably. that I try not to make any grand predictions of the future, because even in simplistically, if you look at it, 5 years ago, who could have imagined the world we live in now,
That's right.
in many aspects of that world, and certainly even purely technologically? Uh, uh, and 20 years ago or 25 years ago, right at the millennium time, this was a different planet, a different universe. So
Right.
anything that I can predict that the things will be this way in 10 years, I'm pretty sure that with 99% probability I'll be way off. So I'll try to I won't predict, but my feeling is that I remain more on the Yann LeCun side. I believe that although I know, because I interact a little bit with them, that uh, social psychologists are making experiments and they study many of these systems from their own perspective and with the methodologies of their own science. And they try to have evidence, again, in the methodologies of their own science, that AI agents may exhibit some form of, I don't know if I would call it consciousness, but definitely a self-serving bias. So you can see when some things going wrong. So let's say it's a group effort. Multi-agents are working together, and something is going well. You see agents to try to say that they had a bigger part uh, in that ultimate result. Whereas if something fails, they try to say that themselves, I mean, the artificial agent we're talking about now, uh, to to uh, to assess that their contribution to the effort was smaller. So is this consciousness? Is this just an algorithmic side effect? It's unclear. So I think to move in the direction and have a, for, a more accurate assessment of where we're going, we need to bring in many people beyond technologists. We need social scientists, we need cognitive scientists, we need psychologists, and then try to bring in their philosophy and their scientific pathways to be able to assess this. As a technologist, though, as I said, I'm interacting with some of these people, but I remain a technologist. This is what I am and what I do. Um, the word consciousness is semantically very heavyweight, and I believe that, like in all other previous industrial revolutions, people got afraid of the human creation, that the world is ending now that we have these machines and we won't have work, and then these machines will do the things that we used to do with our hands, and what are we going to do with that? Although now it's at the highest level, at the cognitive level, I believe still we'll continue to be able to control these machines. And even if we reach a point where we can say it will be AGI, I think this AGI will remain within the realm of the human dominion, so to speak. That's my feeling. That's my belief. And um, and if it's based on something, is it's based on the past and what I see. The, one of the great things that most of us and most of the technologies that work in AI are not putting so much emphasis on is that the combination of embodied artificial intelligence, robotics, I mean, most of us talk about LLMs and Gen AI and AGI and so on, but it's all soft. It's all software. It's all cognitive. It's trying to enhance or replace our cognitive abilities. The challenge when you try to bring such intelligence inside a robot, I'm not saying anthropomorphic robot, but something that is mechanical and needs to do some things in the 3D world that we live in. I think this is an order of magnitude more challenging than just the cognitive part. And I believe that the robotic part of AI uh, will be a frontier. I mean, companies already, I won't mention names, already working on it, both in America and in Asia and elsewhere. Tremendous progress has been done there. But I think from where we are to where we will be, um, there's a tremendous distance. And when you combine, let's say, mechanical engineering and all the other engineering in general with AI, uh, there we'll see some wonders that I'm still not afraid that they will conquer us, but they will change the way we live in much more dramatically than what LLMs and Gen AI is doing it right now.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely taking a sort of a very pragmatic sort of viewpoint of where these things are going. I'm probably more on the kind of the things are accelerating side, and we could just do a separate interview on just the robotics, like the World Foundation model for NVIDIA, which they made open source this year. There's AG
Sure.
World that created a platform that's open source. There's Figure AI, and they come up with a Helix model, which is a vision language action model, which can abstract, it can generalize, which is really, really interesting. Bernard Kozla, which I did a fireside with Bernard Kozla. He really is the number one investor in the world,
Hmm.
a great entrepreneurial background as well. And he
Okay.
definitely has pro where these things are going, right? I mean, he's predicting, within not too distant future, over 1 billion robots that will be sort of everywhere, right? So,
Well, yeah,
and he also indicated that there will be unmanageable capabilities or progress just within the next few years. And again, that's just my recollection of my fireside with them. And
sure, sure, sure,
I
sure, sure.
recommend that the viewers go to ACM Tech Talks because I did one with him, so you can get his exact viewpoints.
What he said exactly, yeah.
Yeah, but I would say he's probably leaning more towards where I'm leaning,
Hmm.
or I'm leaning more towards where he's going. We're at the end of our interview, and there's so many different areas we can get into.
But
Um,
when I talk to you, when you interview me, it is, well, a fireside chat, but or having a glass of wine by the sea. I'm Greek, so it has to be by the sea, and the whole day passes by with rapid fire of intellectual exchange. It's I really appreciate you inviting me for these interviews, and they're so enjoyable, and I hope that the listeners and enjoy that as well.
so I'm going to ask you one final question, right?
Sure.
I've got an upcoming interview with Bob Langer.
Uh-huh.
And Bob Langer is one of 12 institutional professors at MIT. There's only 12. He's got over 450,000 citations, and he's founded or invested in over 40 companies. And his students and himself had a tremendous impact in hundreds of different companies. He's probably the foremost biomedical engineer, but using computers and AI and things like that. And people with his background don't get into our Turing Awards, or it's
Hmm.
like um, Demi Hassabis, who's sort of similar ilk, but he got a Nobel Prize in chemistry.
We're playing chemistry, yeah.
Yeah. Is there a possibility of these people who do use computation and definitely are using different aspects of computation can get some kind of recognition? Do you see any kind of movement in this area? I mean, Bob Langer will in my opinion, will probably get a Nobel Prize, right? Because if to be Hassabis got one, all of
Yes,
them
yes,
will get
yes.
one, right? So,
Um, the mission of ACM is that it's a global scientific and educational organization that fosters the advancement of the art, science, engineering, and application of computing. So it's not just the data management systems and the operating systems and the graphics and so on. It's also the practical aspects of engineering of it, but also the applications, the non-trivial marriage between computing and whatever application is out there. And that's part of ACM. And as we saw from Demis getting the Nobel Prize in chemistry, although he's a neuroscientist and he is uh, his I would say that his main contribution, his tool and his use was computing. So in exactly the same way, interdisciplinary contributions with computing plus X, with computing for X, or X for computing are very much in the sphere of ACM activities and ACM awards. Of course, in order for someone to get an award, they have to be nominated. So if a group of people recognize this and nominate the names that you mentioned or whoever else has made fundamental contributions, even to the applications of computing, they are very much eligible to get the Turing Award. And this interdisciplinarity, us computing people have often focused on in our own world. I mean, it happens usually, our comfort zone, our sandcastles in our own territory, and we've been focusing on pure computing, which is amazing. It's very important, of course. And then the chemists have been focusing on chemistry, and the neuroscientists have been focusing on neuroscience. But when things come together, right at the seams, is where tremendous and fertile activity is happening. And ACM is now trying to put more emphasis and without losing its focus on pure computing, but also to put more emphasis on this interdisciplinary meeting of the fields. And next year, ACM is working on having an ACM AI Summit, a 3-day event, probably sometime in the second half of 2026, where the emphasis would not be the pure AI, it will be AI plus X, AI for X, X for AI, where hopefully we'll have some luminaries that have served this space of AI, interdisciplinary AI, let's call it, but also some practical aspects that will show the impact that AI can have, how we can prepare ourselves for it, what are the technological challenges, what are the societal challenges. And I expect this 3-day event to be pivotal for ACM, but also a milestone for the progress of interdisciplinary AI. And I hope I can talk about more about it in a few months with you. But it's something that I really look forward to see taking shape and then eventually happening in the second half of 26.
So Yannis, I appreciate the nuanced sort of explanation. And what I'm hearing is there's a spot, not on the Turing Award site, but there's a spot in general for ACM to take in people like a Bob Langer to be part of
Including all the awards, but across ACM and all of its activities, absolutely.
or Demi Hassabis, who is actually the head of AI at Google. So
Yes,
there's spots
yeah,
for these people.
absolutely.
Yeah, and in fact, Bob Langer is the most awarded engineer in history, right? With over 450,000 citations. So, Yannis, thank you for coming in today. I really appreciate you giving such an excellent sort of dialogue, and your wisdom and experience comes across, and all of the things you're doing and propelling ACM into the next quarter century with ACM 4.1. So thank you again.
Thank you for inviting me. It's always a great pleasure talking with you, and at your disposal.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.